The early morning wind tugged at the flags lining the edge of the training range. The sky was overcast, and the ground still held onto the night's chill. Soldiers stood in clusters, hands buried in their jacket pockets, breath steaming in the air. They weren't talking about weather, though. Their attention was locked on a printed range report someone had casually left on the bench near the command tent. One name jumped off the page, Sergeant Mia Reynolds. "Who's that?" one soldier asked, brow raised, smirking as he tapped the paper. Another laughed under his breath. Apparently, she logged a confirmed shot at 3,000 meters. 3,000, the first repeated, louder now, drawing more eyes. "That's a joke, right?" More chuckles followed. Someone made a dramatic show of pulling out imaginary binoculars. Another mimed a bullet flying for 5 minutes before landing. It was all in good humor, or at least that's what they told themselves. In truth, they weren't ready to believe it. Not from her. Mia stood off to the side, quietly checking her gear. Her rifle case rested beside her boots, spotless and meticulously organized. She had heard the jokes. She always did. But she didn't respond. She never did. She had been here less than a week, transferred in from a different unit after a quiet deployment overseas. Not many knew much about her, and fewer had bothered to ask. In their eyes, she was just another box to check on a diversity chart. New, female, quiet. No one expected her to actually be the real deal. "Bet it was a typing error," someone muttered. Mia zipped her jacket and finally looked up, her gaze steady and unreadable. She didn't need to explain herself. Her weapon would do the talking when the time came. Still, the laughter around her had a way of tightening her jaw. Not out of anger, just a deep, familiar disappointment. That was when the crowd parted, and silence rippled like a wave. Colonel Hayes stepped into view. He wasn't a loud man, nor did he carry himself like someone who demanded attention. But when he spoke, people listened. Years of service had etched lines into his face, and the way he looked at his soldiers was the way a builder looks at unfinished stone, always evaluating. He held the same range report in his hand, eyes scanning the group. "I see some of you find this amusing," he said calmly. No one answered. He turned the paper over slowly, as if considering something, then looked up and nodded toward Mia. "Sergeant Reynolds logged that shot under combat conditions," he said. 3,000 meters. Not a test. Not a drill. One shot. One kill." The silence deepened. Someone cleared their throat. Another shifted awkwardly. Hayes folded the paper once and tucked it into his pocket. "For those who doubt it," he continued, "you'll have your chance to watch her prove it again." A few heads snapped toward Mia, now curious rather than dismissive. "Tomorrow morning. Live fire. You'll all be there." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving nothing but the wind and a lot of uneasy thoughts. Mia didn't move. She didn't speak. But behind her calm expression, something had shifted. The doubts had always been there. They came with the uniform, with the name tag, with the silence in briefing rooms where no one looked her in the eye. But this time, she had a chance to make them all listen. Not with words, with a single bullet. The following morning, the air at the range was colder than usual. Not in temperature, but in tension. No one laughed today. The usual pre-drill chatter had faded into silence, replaced by quiet footsteps and nervous glances. Soldiers gathered along the observation line, unsure of what to expect. Some were still skeptical. Others were simply curious. But all of them showed up. Mia Reynolds walked out alone, carrying her rifle case with the same steady hands that had drawn so much attention. Her face gave away nothing. No nerves. No pride. Just focus. She moved like someone who had done this 1,000 times before, and in truth, she had. Just never in front of an audience so eager to watch her fail. Colonel Hayes stood beside the target monitor station, arms folded behind his back. He gave no speech, no reminder, no encouragement. He didn't need to. His presence alone was enough to keep the mood serious. 3,000 meters is no guess, he said quietly to his second-in-command. You either hit or you don't. There's no halfway. A tech team had set up the long-range target well before dawn. It was barely visible even with binoculars. A slim metal plate, far beyond what most snipers would ever attempt during routine drills. Wind speed data flashed across the monitor. Conditions were tricky, gusts shifting every few seconds. Not ideal, but that made it better. This wasn't just about proving skill. It was about proving control. Mia reached the firing platform and knelt beside her weapon. Her rifle was custom-built, modified for long-range engagement, with a scope most soldiers in this unit had never even seen before. She adjusted it with precision, each turn of the dial deliberate, each movement measured. No wasted motion, no second-guessing. Behind her, a few younger soldiers leaned in to get a better view. One of them, the same man who joked about the typo yesterday, whispered under his breath, "If she hits that, I'll eat my boots." His friend didn't laugh this time. He just watched. Mia lay flat against the mat, her body perfectly aligned with the weapon. She adjusted her scope again, checked the wind one last time, then steadied her breath. Slow inhale, slow exhale. Her finger rested gently on the trigger, but she didn't squeeze yet. Timing mattered. It always had. At 3,000 meters, a bullet takes over 3 seconds to reach its mark. In that time, the earth turns. The wind shifts. Gravity works against you. There's no forgiveness. No excuses. Mia's heartbeat slowed. Her world narrowed to a single point on the horizon. The steel target, just a dot in the distance. Then, without warning, she fired. The crack of the rifle echoed across the range. For a moment, no one breathed. All eyes turned to the target monitor. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. A sharp ping echoed faintly, barely audible. Bullseye. The metal plate swung slightly from the impact. Dead center. Gasps broke the silence. No one spoke at first. Then, the murmurs began, quiet, stunned, respectful. She actually did it. Perfect shot. Unbelievable. Mia stood, brushed the dust off her uniform, and began packing up her rifle. She didn't look around. She didn't smile. This wasn't for applause. This was for proof. Colonel Hayes gave a small nod, almost to himself. Then he turned to the others. "I don't care if you've been here 5 months or 15 years, he said calmly. Excellence doesn't ask for permission. And with that, the crowd dispersed, slower this time. Quieter. Some stayed back, looking at Mia as if they were seeing her for the first time. The man who promised to eat his boots just shook his head and walked away, humbled. Mia didn't need to say a word. The range had spoken for her. The news spread fast, faster than anyone expected. By noon, every barracks and break room was buzzing with one name, Sergeant Mia Reynolds. No longer just a quiet new transfer. No longer just the subject of quiet jokes. Now she was the one who had hit a target that most wouldn't even attempt. One shot. No hesitation. A confirmed bullseye at 3,000 meters. But respect in the military isn't handed out like medals. One impressive shot didn't erase years of ingrained doubt. It didn't undo the unspoken rules about who belonged in which role. Some soldiers were still unconvinced. A few called it luck. Others whispered about perfect conditions. One called it a staged demonstration. Mia knew better than to expect instant change. She'd seen it before. Skill can turn heads, but proof only lasts so long. If you want them to stop talking, you have to keep proving. Again and again. That's why she didn't flinch when the order came in that afternoon. She was being assigned to a 2-day field exercise. Real terrain. Simulated combat conditions. Long-distance recon and a final shot to eliminate a high-value target dummy in a mock enemy encampment. They were calling it a drill. But to Mia, it was something else entirely. It was the real test. The commanding officers had quietly added her name to the roster. Not as a trainee, not as an observer, as the lead sniper. Her spotter, Staff Sergeant Cole Anders, was a seasoned veteran with 17 years in the field. He wasn't much for small talk. Tall, broad-shouldered, and blunt to the point of discomfort. When he first saw her name on the assignment list, he frowned. Not out of anger, just confusion. "You sure this isn't a mistake?" he asked the captain. The captain didn't answer, just pointed toward the report on the wall. Cole glanced at it, eyes scanning the line with Mia's shot details. He didn't say another word after that. When Mia met him at the staging area, he didn't greet her with a handshake or even a nod. He just said one thing: "I don't care what the others say. Just hit the shot." She replied without looking up from her gear. "I don't miss." The transport helicopter lifted off at dawn the next day, cutting through a low cloud bank as the rising sun painted the world in muted orange. Mia sat silently across from Cole, double-checking her rifle's components while the rest of the team stayed quiet. They landed in a remote forest zone just north of the mountain range, where visibility was limited and wind patterns were unpredictable. The mission was clear. They'd hike to a ridge nearly 4 kilometers from the target site, gather intel on movement patterns, and confirm the simulated target's presence. Once verified, Mia would take the shot from elevation. Distance, 2,970 meters. The hike was brutal. Steep inclines, thick brush, uneven footing. But Mia never complained. Cole noticed. Most first-timers, especially snipers, were slower on the approach. Not her. When they reached the ridge, she unpacked her gear and began setting up, checking every variable with clinical precision. Cole scanned the area with binoculars. Target is up. Looks like a command dummy inside the tent structure. Wind's jumpy. Mia didn't respond. She was already adjusting the scope, tracking the way the trees bent slightly to the left every few seconds. She could see the rhythm forming, like a silent pattern only she could read. Cole crouched beside her and looked through his rangefinder. His voice was quieter now. "You really think you can thread that shot?" She didn't look up. "I don't think. I calculate." He blinked, then nodded once, almost respectfully. For the first time since they'd met, he believed her. And somewhere deep in the valley below, her next target waited. The wind had picked up. Not a strong gust, but enough to make the trees sway gently in uneven intervals. At nearly 3,000 meters, that kind of movement meant everything. A shot that long didn't just depend on aim. It depended on timing, physics, and patience. One mistake in the math, and the bullet would miss by meters. Maybe more. Mia lay flat against the dry dirt, her body still and low to the ground. Her sniper rifle was balanced perfectly on the bipod, its barrel pointed toward the target encampment far below. Through the scope, she could just make out the mock enemy tent. A silhouette stood inside, a humanoid dummy designed to simulate a high-value target. The tent flaps moved slightly with the wind. Every detail mattered. She adjusted her scope one last time, dialing in the windage and elevation. The numbers weren't just calculations in her head. They were instincts trained over years of repetition. She had practiced shots like this in Afghanistan, where dust storms and high-altitude winds played games with bullets. She remembered one mission where her spotter called off the shot. "Too risky," he said. But she took it anyway. Hit the mark dead center. After that, no one questioned her again. Until now. Cole crouched beside her, scanning the valley with his rangefinder. He checked the coordinates, confirmed the distance again, then looked over at Mia. She hadn't spoken in 10 minutes. She didn't need to. "Wind's shifting east again," he said quietly. "I see it," Mia replied, eyes locked on the target. "Barometric pressure's dropping too. We've got maybe 60 seconds before it gets worse." Mia didn't answer. Her breathing slowed. She focused on the rhythm of the breeze, the subtle movement of the trees, the way the light curved around the rocks. It was like solving a puzzle without words. Everything had to line up. The moment had to be perfect. Cole glanced back down the ridge. No one else could make this shot, he muttered, more to himself than her. She heard him. She just didn't respond. She adjusted the trigger pressure slightly, then settled her cheek back on the stock. Target locked, she said finally. Cole looked back through his binoculars. On your word. Mia waited. The wind dipped, then steadied. She could feel it, the quiet stillness before the change. It was now or never. She exhaled slowly, and with one smooth motion, pulled the trigger. The shot cracked like thunder across the valley. 3 seconds passed. The world felt suspended in time. Even the birds seemed to go quiet. Then came the sound, a faint metallic ping echoing from below. Cole stared through the binoculars, then shook his head in disbelief. Direct hit. Center mass. Mia didn't move, didn't celebrate, just slid the bolt back and began reloading. Cole lowered the binoculars and turned to her. I've been doing this a long time, he said. Seen a lot of shooters. But that. She looked up at him, her expression calm. I just do the math. He smiled barely. Yeah. Well, you're the only one I know who can make the math hit like that. A moment later, the radio on Cole's shoulder crackled to life. The command center confirmed the hit and gave the order to return to base. The exercise was complete. As they packed up, Cole kept glancing at Mia. Not with doubt. Not with surprise. With respect. For the first time since the shot, Mia allowed herself a breath of relief. Not because she hit the target, but because, finally, someone had stopped questioning if she could. The helicopter blades sliced through the late afternoon sky as Mia and Cole flew back toward base. The forest below blurred into shades of green and gold, the sun dropping slowly toward the horizon. Inside the cabin, no one spoke. The sound of the rotors filled the silence, but the air between them held something else, unspoken understanding. Cole sat across from Mia, arms resting on his knees, watching her. There was no smugness in his expression, no surprise left in his eyes. What remained was something simpler. Respect. Back at base, word of the hit had already arrived before they touched down. A few soldiers stood near the landing zone, trying to act casual. No one clapped. No one cheered. But they were there, waiting, watching. It was the kind of quiet acknowledgement Mia had come to understand. In the military, the louder the doubt, the quieter the respect. She stepped out of the helicopter, boots hitting the tarmac with practiced ease. Her rifle case was slung over one shoulder, her expression unreadable. Cole followed behind, nodding once to the watching group. Most nodded back. A few still didn't. But they didn't laugh either. That was enough for now. Inside the debriefing room, Colonel Hayes waited with his arms crossed. He was alone, save for one other officer, and his face was as unreadable as ever. Mia stood in front of him, posture straight, eyes forward. Target eliminated, she said plainly. He didn't reply right away. Instead, he looked at Cole. Confirmation, the colonel asked. Cole nodded. Clean hit. 3,000 meters. Center mass. The colonel turned his gaze back to Mia. There was no smile, just a slight narrowing of the eyes. Like he was measuring something far beyond the numbers. That makes 2 records in 2 days, he said finally. That's not common. Mia stayed silent. She wasn't here for recognition. I've seen a lot of shooters, he continued. Men who brag before they ever touch a trigger. You're not one of them. No, sir. I don't need you to be loud, he said. I need you to keep being right. I will, sir. He nodded once, then dismissed them both without ceremony. That was all she needed. Outside, as they walked toward the barracks, Cole spoke up for the first time since the flight. You know, he said, they're going to be watching you a lot closer now. They already were. He nodded. Yeah, but now it won't just be for doubt. Some of them are looking for someone to follow. Not everyone's proud of admitting that. Mia looked up at the sky, now fading into the cool blues of evening. I didn't come here to lead, she said. That doesn't matter, Cole replied. Sometimes, people follow the ones who keep showing up and doing the job right, whether they want to or not. She thought about that for a moment, then quietly replied, as long as they stop looking at me like a mistake, I don't care what they call it. Later that night, Mia sat alone outside the barracks, her rifle resting beside her, cleaned and reassembled. The base was quiet, and the stars were beginning to appear overhead. Her fingers traced the edges of the scope, not out of habit, but out of reflection. She thought of all the times she'd been told no, all the times her ability had been questioned before a single round was fired. And then she thought of the silence that followed her shot today. That sound, total silence after impact, that was the only approval she ever needed. Far in the distance, a breeze moved through the trees. It carried no laughter this time, just respect. Quiet, steady, earned. Morning came with a thin veil of fog rolling across the base, softening the edges of buildings and casting everything in a muted gray. Mia was already awake, lacing her boots on the edge of her bunk. She didn't need an alarm. Her mind was wired to wake before the sun. Years of discipline did that. Or maybe it was something deeper, something that never let her rest too long. Word of her field exercise had reached more than just the barracks. Officers, instructors, even veterans stationed nearby had started whispering about the shot. The precision, the calm, the distance. The stories weren't exaggerated. They didn't need to be. Reality was impressive enough. But with recognition came something else. Attention. As Mia made her way toward the mess hall, two younger recruits stepped aside to let her pass. One nodded. The other offered a hesitant, respectful glance. It was subtle, but she noticed. Not long ago, those same eyes had been full of doubt. Now they carried something closer to admiration. Still quiet, still uncertain, but different. Inside, Cole was already waiting with a tray and 2 black coffees. He slid one across the table without looking up. "You're a legend now," he said with a half-smile. "Didn't take long." "I'm not here for that," she replied, sipping her coffee. "Doesn't matter. You didn't choose the attention. It chose you." Mia didn't answer. Her eyes drifted toward a nearby table where 3 instructors sat reviewing training logs. One of them kept glancing over. Not with disdain, just curiosity. Like he was studying a puzzle that didn't quite fit. After breakfast, she was called to the armory. Not for a routine check. This time, it was different. The master armorer had requested her personally. He was a thick-shouldered man with a deep voice and a reputation for perfectionism. He rarely said more than necessary. But when Mia walked in, he set down his tools and studied her for a moment. "You've got clean form," he said, pointing to her rifle. "But I've got something better. If you're going to keep making those shots, you need gear that can keep up." He handed her a custom stock, lighter, steadier, made for long-distance balance. "Consider a loan," he said. "If you don't like it, bring it back. If you hit another miracle shot, keep it." Mia nodded once and accepted it without a word. Respect wasn't always spoken out loud. Sometimes it came in actions. Small gestures. Quiet trust. Later that afternoon, she was approached by an unfamiliar face, Captain Riley. He was known for overseeing specialized sniper programs and advanced recon teams. A man who only recruited the best. "I've been watching your record," he said directly. "And your shot yesterday, that wasn't luck. That was control. Timing. Calm under pressure." She met his gaze. "I've trained for years to make that shot." "I believe you. Which is why I'm asking if you'd consider transferring. We've got a program, elite snipers, real operations, not just drills. You'd be the only woman in the unit." Mia didn't hesitate. "Send me the details." He handed her a sealed folder. "Take your time, but not too long." As he walked away, Mia opened the folder. Inside were maps, mission reports, and training schedules. Real deployments, real targets, real pressure. But none of it scared her. She was ready for all of it. Back in the barracks that night, she sat on her bunk, the custom rifle stock in her hands, the transfer folder resting beside her. Everything was changing now. The doubts were fading. The jokes were gone. What remained was something else, expectation. And Mia Reynolds never ran from expectation. She aimed straight through it. The sun had barely crested over the mountains when Mia stepped onto the training field. A cold wind tugged at her sleeves, but she didn't flinch. Across the range, rows of soldiers were already in motion, some running drills, others lining up at the shooting lanes. But this morning felt different. Eyes followed her now, not with suspicion, but with quiet expectation. She moved with purpose, her new rifle slung across her back, the upgraded stock already feeling like an extension of her own body. Each step was steady, calm. Cole met her near the observation post with a small nod, but this time he didn't say much. He didn't have to. There was no tension anymore, just respect. Word had spread quickly about Captain Riley's offer. Some believed it. Others doubted she'd take it. A few even joked she wouldn't last in an elite unit. But none of those jokes were said near her now. Colonel Hayes was watching from the edge of the field. He hadn't spoken to her since the debrief, but his gaze lingered longer than usual. Not suspicious, calculating, as if he was trying to see just how far she might go. The day's exercise wasn't anything special. Standard engagement. Multiple moving targets between 600 and 1,200 meters. But everyone on the line seemed to be waiting for one thing, Mia's turn. She waited patiently, watched the others go. Some made their shots. Some missed. The instructors called out scores and made notes on clipboards. When her name was called, the line went quiet. Mia stepped forward, took her position, and readied her rifle. The silence behind her felt heavy, but she welcomed it. That silence meant they were watching now, not because they doubted her, but because they wanted to learn. She took her first shot. Direct hit. Second shot. Hit again. Third. Fourth. Fifth. Not a single miss. By the time she cleared the final moving target, the instructor lowered his clipboard and just stared at her for a moment before quietly muttering, "Perfect pass." As she stepped off the line, one of the younger soldiers approached her hesitantly. He was maybe 20, fresh out of basic. He held his rifle awkwardly, like it didn't belong in his hands yet. "Sergeant Reynolds," he said, voice unsure, "how do you stay so calm when everyone's watching?" Mia looked at him, then down at his hands. "You stop thinking about who's watching," she replied. "Start thinking about what you're doing." He nodded, clearly trying to absorb her words. "It's just people expect you to miss. And when you don't, they expect you to miss next time." Mia's voice was quiet but steady. "Then make it harder for them to doubt you." He nodded again, this time with more confidence. He didn't say, "Thank you." He didn't need to. As Mia walked back toward the barracks, Cole fell into step beside her. "You're not just making hits anymore," he said. "You're setting a standard." She glanced at him, one brow raised. "That a compliment?" "No," he said. "It's a warning. You raise the bar, people will try to pull you down. They won't say it, but it'll be there." Mia didn't stop walking. "Then I'll shoot from higher." He chuckled softly. "That's what I figured." That evening, she stood alone at the edge of a range, looking out at the distant hills. The wind had picked up again, rustling the dry grass. She closed her eyes for a moment and breathed it in. The pressure was real now. The spotlight was brighter. But Mia had never wanted to be invisible. She just wanted to be undeniable. And now she was. 2 weeks later, the sky above the base was storm-dark and restless. Heavy clouds hung low, casting long shadows over the training grounds. A storm was coming, not just in the sky, but through the chain of command. Rumors had been circulating since the morning briefing. Something was shifting. Something bigger than a drill. Mia sat in the ready room, her gear already packed. Across from her, Cole leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his face unreadable. "They're sending us out," he said finally. Not training. Not simulation. Real-world recon. Classified. Mia met his eyes. Mission details? None. Just that it's deep terrain. High elevation. Live target. We're going in quiet, pulling the shot, and getting out. She nodded once. Who else? Cole gave a slight smirk. Just us. There it was. The unspoken confirmation. The shot at 3,000 meters, the flawless field exercise, the instructors watching in silence. It had all led to this. No more observers. No more proving herself. This time, they weren't testing her. They were depending on her. An hour later, they boarded a black transport chopper under thick clouds. No insignia. No questions. Just a mission folder with coordinates and a single objective. Eliminate a high-value hostile commander operating from an off-grid location deep in the mountains. Intelligence was limited. Weather conditions were hostile. And the shot, if it came, would push her further than any range she had fired from before. As they flew over the rugged terrain, Mia reviewed the maps in silence. Her mind wasn't racing. It was sharpening. Every ridgeline, every tree cluster, every slope, she memorized them like pieces of a larger puzzle. This wasn't just another shot. It was her chance to prove, without question, that she belonged not just on the team, but in history. The insertion point was brutal. Cold air bit at her cheeks as she rappelled down the side of a cliff with Cole close behind. The wind howled through the trees. Rain was coming, the kind that soaked through your bones and threw off every calculation a sniper depended on. They didn't speak. They moved in sync, weaving through thick forest and climbing a steep incline toward a narrow ridge facing the compound. They reached the overwatch point just before dusk. The valley below was dense with fog, but through the gaps, she spotted movement. A small camp, 2 guards, and 1 central structure. According to intel, their target would be inside by nightfall. Cole set up the spotter scope, while Mia assembled her rifle under a sheet to block the moisture. Her hands were steady, her breathing even. But inside, the weight of the moment pressed against her like a second skin. Target window is 5 minutes, Cole said. Elevation's tricky. Winds shifting northeast. You sure you can calculate this? She didn't look at him. I already did. Through the scope, she watched the door to the structure open. A man stepped out, flanked by 2 more. He walked into the open, standing just beneath a small awning, unaware of the danger above. Cole gave the final range, 3,123 meters. She adjusted her scope, factored in the wind, the drop, the humidity, and the cold. It was the hardest shot she'd ever taken, but her finger didn't tremble. She squeezed the trigger. Silence. Then, the faintest echo of impact. The target dropped. Clean. Instant. Unmistakable. Cole lowered the scope, eyes wide. He confirmed. Mia exhaled, slowly, then broke down the rifle piece by piece. Back at the extraction point, the storm broke overhead. Rain pelted the canopy above them as the chopper lifted into the sky. She didn't speak on the flight home. She didn't have to, because this time there were no doubters left. Only witnesses.